Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week we're going to be talking about the Nintendo GameCube, and this is seriously an awesome console to own and to collect for. And today what we're going to be doing is installing a couple of modifications to it to make it even better than it already is. So for starters, we're going to be installing this device here. This is the GCLoader. This is an optical disc emulator that's made by Black Dog Tech. And what it does is it replaces the original DVD drive here with this device, and it allows you to load games directly from an SD card. In addition to that, we're also going to be installing the GC Dual. So this is, I believe, an open source project, but it also was created by Black Dog Tech as well. And it allows you to get direct HDMI out from your GameCube, which is extremely convenient, certainly for tournaments and things like that. But it also provides analog RGB to the multi-out port. So this is really nice because it makes it a lot easier to get high-quality analog video from your GameCube. So for example, you could use HD Retrovision Super Nintendo cables and get those to work. Or another option would be RGB SCART cables that have the Super Nintendo connector. So yeah, it's a really nice mod to own and to add to a GameCube. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start with the GCLoader because that's the easiest thing to install, and it mostly just involves disassembling and reassembling the GameCube with a screwdriver. So specifically what you need is a game bit screwdriver like this. These are cheap and easy to buy on Amazon, and then you just need a standard Phillips screwdriver. And the goal here is just if you see a screw, take it out, and eventually you'll get the drive completely separated from the GameCube, which is what you see here. Now, if you flip the drive over, it's normally attached to this RF shielding with a bunch of tiny Phillips screws, about 6 of them, all around the bottom. So you have to take those out, and then the RF shielding is separated. And we're actually going to keep this, we're going to set the original drive aside. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to combine this with a 3D printed mount, which is going to go like this. So this allows you to very easily take an SD card in and out of the GameCube. And here is the GCLoader, and the GCLoader is basically going to sit right here. So I'm going to go ahead and screw the GCLoader into place with these 3 screws that are provided in the kit. And then the mount is also going to be attached, and I'm going to be using some of these original screws to attach the 3D printed mounting portion. Okay, so this thing is fully assembled and ready to install. So as you can see, the GCLoader is just bolted directly to the RF shield, and then so is this SD card extender. And so this allows you to just plug in a regular SD card from the top, and then it'll read your games, and also Swiss, which is a multi-purpose homebrew loader application that can also let you load a whole bunch of other things, including various homebrew things like the Game Boy interface and emulation tools as well. All right, so the GCLoader is taken care of, so now let's move on to the hard stuff. Okay, so I've got the GameCube motherboard here, and briefly, I'm just going to show you how to safely remove this heatsink, because it's actually kind of easy to damage stuff if you're not careful with removing it. So what I like to do is I'll take something like this. It could be also a flathead screwdriver or something, and I'll just sandwich it in between on this side of the heatsink, not on the side over here, because I think the sensitive components are here. And then I'm just going to twist clockwise, and it just loosens like that. And there we go. Yeah, so it depends on the revision of the motherboard, but you see there's like some components right here, and they have a tendency to come up with the heatsink if you're not careful. So I always am a little bit cautious and slow with this step just to make sure that I don't damage anything. All right, so now let's move on to getting started with the installation of the GC Dual. Okay, so we're ready to start this modification, and the first thing that we're going to be doing is taking this PCB, this is a quick solder board, and we're going to be attaching it to both the digital port and the AV multi-out. However, before I get too deep into the woods on this, I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands something. So it is very easy to get a purely digital a video out from the GameCube using a variety of different types of adapters. I have one here in my hands. This is the Retrobit Prism, and it plugs into the digital port right here, and you just get HDMI out directly from that. There's also devices like the Carby or the Eon that do the same thing. So this mod that we're doing here is an internal version of this. So they work in the exact same way. The only difference is that this is internal and the other devices are external. Okay, so with that out of the way, we've got to start by soldering this QSB down here onto the main board. However, as you can probably see in the video, it does not lay flat. And that's because there is a lot of excess solder on a variety of points on both the digital port and the multi-out port. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my desoldering gun and just removing solder from a bunch of different points. Most of them are the anchor points out here, and then also the outer two pins here and here. And a similar story here. I'm going to be desoldering these outer two pins on the multi-out, and that should give us the clearance we need so that this can lay nice and flat. Okay, so after desoldering those points, you can see now that the QSB board lays perfectly flat onto the motherboard, and this is what you want. You don't want it crooked or off at some sort of strange angle. You want it to be really perfectly flat against the motherboard. So what we're going to be doing now is soldering this into position, and I'm going to be using this chisel tip on my iron. I am going to spend extra time on each of these points just to make sure that things are properly soldered in place. And I am going to use a pretty generous helping of flux as well. There's also one other thing to note, which is this little assembly of pads right here. This is for setting jumpers on basically how sync is handled on this multi-out. So this is the Super Nintendo style multi-out that's been around for the Nintendo 64, the Super Nintendo, and the GameCube. The way that it's wired up with this mod is that RGB are on these pins, and then sync is here. Normally C-Sync is what you want here, so that's how I'm going to set this up. It also has composite video on this pin right here, so that means that it can be used for the HD Retrovision cables as well. So that's the probably most common use case scenario that people are going to want. Occasionally people might want other things, but honestly I think that's a rare occurrence. So to do that, you're just going to bridge these two pads together. There we go. So those two pads are bridged, and so now C-Sync is going to be coming to this pad right here. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started with soldering in the QSB. All right, so the quick solder board is all set, but before we continue, we're gonna just do some quick tests with the multimeter right here. So I've got the multimeter set to continuity mode, which is represented by this little icon right here. And if there are 2 points that are on the same common pad, if you touch them together, like this, you're gonna get a beep. So you see that's the ground plane right there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna test adjacent pins, pins that are right next to each other, and just make sure that there isn't any continuity, and so far we're looking good here. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick, and then we're going to continue. Okay, so now we're ready to solder in the GC Dual, and it's going to sit right about here. So you can see it has these castellations right here, and those castellations are going to solder onto each of these respective pads right here. And just like before, we're going to test with our multimeter afterwards just to make sure that there's no continuity between the pads. You can also notice that there's a castellation right up here at the top of the board. That's intended to solder directly onto this capacitor on the left-hand side of this capacitor right here. And that's an anchor, so it doesn't actually serve a purpose in terms of the connections, but it's just used as an anchor just to hold everything in place. So I think I'm probably going to start right there and get that anchored in, and get everything centered. And then once that's done, then I'll continue and solder in all of these points. Okay, so we've just got one little thing left to do to solder, and that's this little pad right here. So the kit helpfully is provided with a very small piece of 30 gauge Kynar wire. And so we're going to go from this pad right here to this tiny little via right over here. So some markers to help you find it is this capacitor here. And then on the board it says C55. And then it's this one right here I've already tinned, and it's one away from the center. So let's go ahead and get those soldered into place. Okay, so now that we're done with all the soldering, it's time to reassemble, and we have to make a few small adjustments to this bottom RF shield. So specifically, we have got to remove this metal piece here that's sticking up, and we also need to cut a bit of the RF shielding from about here to, let's just say, about here. So I'm going to use my pair of pliers to do most of this work. Okay, so that's nice and flat now. And now we're going to go ahead and make some cuts here and remove this piece of RF shielding. Okay, so I definitely took off more than I needed, but it doesn't really matter because this stuff doesn't really interfere or get in the way of anything. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start reassembling, and we'll be back with some more in a few minutes. Okay, so one of the last things that we need to do is to make the slot where the little HDMI daughter PCB is going to go. And very conveniently, it slots right into this little area right here. And so what we've got to do is trace out where the HDMI port is so that we can drill an opening for it. So I just have a blue permanent ink marker here, and I'm just running it along the edge of the HDMI port and a little on the sides here too, just to kind of give me an idea of where it goes. And there we go. So now I have an idea of where to drill. So I'm going to go ahead and get a small drill bit. It needs to definitely be small considering the size of this mini HDMI port. And I'm going to start making the hole here for the HDMI, and I'm going to slowly whittle that away until it's all set. All right, so we've got our digital port all set right here. And now what we're going to do is just drill a small hole over here. And then the kit comes with a nut and a screw, and we're going to use that to attach this permanently to this part of the shell. Okay, so I've got the GameCube fully assembled, and one thing I think I should not have done was actually put all the screws back in. The reason why is that if there's some kind of problem, I'm going to have to take this thing apart, figure out what's going on, and reassemble it, and that's really annoying and time-consuming. So if you're following along and installing this yourself, I would suggest just putting a couple of screws in just to keep everything safe and put together. Do a quick test, and as long as everything is working, then go ahead and reassemble. So let's power this thing on and see what it looks like. Okay, looking very good. So there's no sound, but that is not at all surprising because when they ship this kit, it's shipped with the digital audio deliberately turned off. I'm not really sure why that's the case, but they do it, and And so, you know, if you don't know that, you might freak out because there's no sound, but that is actually how it ships. So we're going to go ahead and enable sound, but first I'm just going to load a game. So I'll load Wind Waker here. Okay, so we've got Wind Waker booted up. It's looking really nice. And so to access the main menu of the GC Dual, you have to hold the left and right triggers and the X and Y button, and you have to hold it down for like 2 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that really quick. And there we go. Here's our menu for the GC video. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in where it says Output Settings, and I'm going to hit X, and we got to turn on Enhanced DVI mode. And there's our sound. So as long as that happens and the sound is normal, then your installation is successful, because as you can see, all the video looks great, the sound sounds good. That's about all that we can hope for. So I'm just gonna hit Store Settings here so it saves that information. And it did. And now we're all set, and this installation is finished. I have to say, it is really nice to have all of this internal, and the fact that you can get RGB out of the multi-out port is a really nice feature to this modification as well. So I definitely recommend it, but it's certainly not for everyone, and you can get very comparable results with existing solutions that you just plug into the back of your GameCube. All right, so that's it for this video. If you guys like this kind of content, then consider subscribing to the channel. I have videos out like this every Friday, and of course, if you have any mods that you want installed or a console that you need repaired, you can always reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. Okay, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.